Story time about how I got arrested for stalking my celebrity crush. Disclaimer, this is not my story time, it was sent to me on Instagram. When I was 15, I saw my celebrity crush for the first time in a movie. After that, I pretty much went to all of his movie premieres and events. I was able to take a picture with him and even got his signature. To say that I was obsessed was an understatement. Now, here's where the problem began. He started dating this woman, aka another celebrity, and I pretty much lost it after that. At the time, I was living with my mother and she couldn't help but notice the change in me. I started staying out pretty late, mostly because I was out in the city looking for him. I knew all of his hangout spots because the paparazzi always caught him there. So I basically would hang out everywhere he would. I followed him to his house, I followed him to the gym, and I followed him to the grocery store, pretty much everywhere. I decided to sign up to his gym, and I started talking to him, and he started talking to me, and he asked me out on a date. Part 2 is up. After stalking him for a while, my celebrity crush asked me out on a date. But he didn't know I was stalking him, of course. Disclaimer, this is not my story time, it was sent to me on Instagram. On the date, he pretty much only talked about himself. He told me he had just broken up with his ex, which I knew that. And I basically pretended not to know anything about him. There was lots of awkward silence and I just couldn't help but stare at him the whole time. That's when he asked for the check and paid for dinner. I was totally expecting him to ask me to go back to his place. Well, when he didn't, I was really disappointed. So I did the logical thing, I invited myself over. That's when he told me that he couldn't because he had to get up early. After that, I didn't hear back from him at all. So I decided to go to the gym where I knew he was going to be. But when I tried to say hello to him, he told me to stay away. Then he asked one of the gym employees to escort me out. And when I got home, the cops were waiting for me to arrest me. They showed me pictures of me stalking my celebrity crush. Part 3 is up. As soon as I got home, the cops were there and they arrested me. And they showed me pictures of me stalking my celebrity crush. Disclaimer, this is not my story time, it was sent to me on Instagram. Since they had all this evidence and my face on the pictures, I couldn't say it wasn't me. They told me that after our date, my celebrity crush got a really bad feeling from me, so he decided to install cameras around his house and in his car. And well, that's when he caught me stalking him around his house at odd hours and following him in my car all the time. I was taken to court and told I had to go to therapy. Apparently, he felt bad for me though and didn't want to press charges. He did get a restraining order, so I definitely can't go near him. The good news is that I have another celebrity crush. Yay!
Story time about how a stranger hunted me through a national park. I was camping in the middle of nowhere in Washington near Mount Rainier. Not the official campground, just way out in the forest where I wouldn't have expected to see another human for miles. One night, I wake up and hear something. I open my tent and was surprised to see a guy sitting on my fire hydrant right outside of my tent. He looked like a regular guy, but he was sitting just a couple feet away from my tent and made me uneasy. I also noticed that he didn't have a bag or pack or anything with him. When he saw me from my tent, his eyes were widened and I just in his bullets and he bolted off. I shook with my core at first, but over the next day I managed to put it out of my mind. I thought to myself that it was just an odd occurrence and that guy was probably on drugs or something. I made myself believe that he had somehow managed to set up a camp not far from mine and it was just a coincidence. 2 days after this, I had hiked another 15 miles in totally random directions that nobody could take the same path as on accident. I was sitting by the fire that night and I started hearing noises. I was convinced there was someone there. I called up to them and out of the darkness, someone asked me, "Do you know how to get to Bell's Canyon?" I quickly said no and I don't even think that's a real place there. However, they kept talking to me from just out of my line of vision. It only got creepier from here. Part 2 about a stranger hunting me through a national park. I grabbed my flashlight and tried to see them, but they yelled at me to aim it away. This spooked me and not wanting to piss off a potentially crazy person, I did. After about 15 minutes, the voice was still asking me random questions in the darkness. I was so freaked out and it sounded like it had gone closer. I built up the courage and shone my light in the direction that the voice was coming from. It was the same dude who had been outside my tent 2 nights before. I realized that he had to have followed me almost 15 miles over 2 days because there was no way that he could have just accidentally wound up in the same spot in such a vast wilderness. At this point, I knew it was no coincidence. As soon as my light hit him, he took off again. This time I started to chase him, but I didn't want to get lost in the wilderness in the dark and stopped after only 100 to 200 feet. I decided the trip was over the next morning and hiked back over 3 days, constantly doubling back and trying to throw anyone off my trail. I would also occasionally hide and wait to see if he would come by following me. On the first night hiking out, I heard what sounded like a person wrestling circles outside of my tent twice, but by the time I mustered the courage to look, there was nothing. The whole hike back I had knots in my stomach. I almost cried when I finally got back to my car and the relief washed over me. On a paranormal experience in the mountains. My best friend and I live by some canyons in California. We love to take day trips in the canyons to get away from the city noises. We are always cautious of where we park and who's around us when we go because it's always just the 2 of us. At this time, we were 17 and had driven all the way up to the top where the road was just. We parked, kicked back, rolled down the windows, and we drove across freezing silence. Since we were pretty high up in the mountains, there weren't any homes, stores, and especially no phone or radio service. The favorite parking place was basically the edge of the mountain, so if anyone was to fall, they'd go straight down to their demise. There weren't any bushes or trees to break any falls. After about 30 minutes of relaxing, we hear the sound of a woman groaning in pain. We looked at each other in confusion because there wasn't anyone around, and the next parking spot was another 10-minute drive down. It was around 7 p.m. and the sun was already setting. We ignored the sound since we only heard it once, but after about 15 minutes, we talked about the noise and decided to try and figure out what it could be out of curiosity. Right then, we heard it again, but it was louder. I thought someone might be hurt, but again, no one should be around because there weren't any walking trails and it was impossible for anyone to be below or above. This is when we stupidly got out of the car and used our cell phone flashlights to look around. Let's prove my paranormal experience in the mountains. We double-checked to see if anyone was there, but we saw nothing. That's when my friend called to me, telling me that she had a bad feeling. Right before I had the chance to ask her about what, the body jolted closer to the edge of the mountain. At first, I thought she was pulling a prank, but the look on her face was of pure shock, followed by her bursting out in tears. I started to panic and tried to calm her down, but from a distance coming up the road, seemingly out of nowhere, we saw an older man limping towards us. He had dirty, torn-up clothes on. There wasn't any blood or noticeable injuries on him, but the fact that he was limping towards us and moving far away from any trails creeped us out. I snapped my friend out of the minivan into our car. We locked the doors and pulled out of the parking lot. The man was nowhere in sight as we made our exit. After about 20 minutes driving back down, we see the same man limping. There was no way he could beat us going down the road. I asked my friend what happened earlier while she was crying. She said she felt the urge to jump and felt like someone had pushed her. The next day, a friend tells us that apparently in the time of this incident, a man and his wife and only daughter had died up there. No one knows exactly what happened, but the woman's body was found in the water. The man's body was found in the car crash where we found the first time, and the daughter's body was nowhere to be found.
Story time on how my boyfriend mom went from hating me to having a threesome with me and her son. Okay, so boom, we are jumping right in. One day I was with my boyfriend and we were on our way to the movies and he got a call from his mom. She told him that he needed to come home immediately because of something important at home. But I knew that every time she did this was because she really just wanted her son to stop hanging out with me because she hated my guts. Like she did not like me and I never knew why. Oh, but one day I figured it out. So one evening on the 1 month anniversary of me and my boyfriend, I was getting ready, doing what girls do, and I kind of expected you know what to happen, so I shaved my hoo-ha. I got all pretty and I headed over to my boyfriend's house. I knock on the door and his mom answers. His mom then tells me that I'm an hour early and he's still getting his haircut, so he's not home. I told her sorry, I must have gotten the times wrong, so I asked her if I can wait right here. She gave me a disgusted look and said whatever and slammed the door. Then she said she's been waiting for this moment, like the part 2. Part 2 on how my boyfriend mom went from hating me to having a threesome with me and her son. Okay, so boom, like I said, she closed the door and told me she's been waiting for this moment. She then says that I'm a fine young lady and she's been waiting to have me alone and that we have 1 hour before her son gets there. At that moment, it hit me. I knew exactly what was going on. And quite frankly, I was happy because his mom is hot. She led me to her room and then we started doing the nasty. By the way, she's 29 and I'm 17. Y'all wouldn't believe what happens next. My boyfriend walked through the door, caught us, but he wasn't shocked. He wasn't even mad. It was more like a jealous thing. Then he joined and we all started doing the nasty. I was literally shocked. I didn't believe what was happening. And this went on for 2 years. But then me and my boyfriend wanted to stop and just focus on each other and not his mom. She didn't like that at all. Like the part 3. Part 3 on how my boyfriend mom went from hating me to having a threesome with me and her son. Okay, so boom, like I said, after 2 years of me and my boyfriend dealing with his mom, we wanted to stop and just focus on each other. And oh, she didn't like that at all. She went right back to treating me horribly and hating my guts. And whenever she had a chance, she kept trying to break me and my boyfriend up. But it never worked. It looks like the only way to make her stop is to dabble back with her, but I'm not interested. Eventually, I'll move out with my boyfriend and we'll be all situated. So if you find out your boyfriend mom hates you, maybe she just wants to be with you.
Story time about how I found my boyfriend with his best friend. My boyfriend and I have been together for almost 6 years. We met in cosmetology school. We both had a love for makeup and hair. While in school, we decided to partner up and open up our own little business. I started liking him from the moment we met, but he never made a move on me. And I was not used to that. So we were friends for a few months. One night, we went out with our friends and we got a little drunk and one thing led to another and I kissed him. He kissed me back and after that, we were inseparable. We even moved in together and we talked about marriage. But ultimately, he would never propose. I always asked him when we were going to get married and he just never had an answer. His best friend, let's call him Roger. Roger was a great guy and he always hung out with us. I liked him. They would hang out all the time and I never thought anything of it because they were best friends. One day, Roger made a comment about my boyfriend being really good looking. I brushed it off, but a few days later, I walk into our apartment and there they are on the couch doing stuff. Literally passed out. Part 2 is up. I walk in on my boyfriend and his male best friend on the couch doing things to each other. I actually fainted as soon as I saw it. All the blood rushed to my head and I passed out. And when I came to, they're both standing over me half naked. My boyfriend picked me up from the floor and put me on the couch. And Roger went to the kitchen to get me a drink. I felt dizzy and I couldn't even speak. I blurted out, "You're gay?" Then my boyfriend started crying. He said he didn't mean to hurt me and that he never wanted to waste my time. I asked him how long he'd known that he was gay. And he said for a few years. That meant I was wasting all of my youth on him. I could have had children. I could have been married already. I was so upset. Then guess what? My boyfriend says he's gonna go stay at Roger's place so that he can give me some space. Of course I begged him not to leave because I knew that would be the end of us. I thought we could work through this. He packed his stuff and left. Part 3 is up. My boyfriend left me for his best friend, who's a guy. A few days passed by and I was super devastated. That's when my boyfriend comes and knocks on my door. Then he gave me the worst news of all. He told me he was gonna marry his best friend, Roger. He explained to me that they had been in love for a long time, but they never told each other anything. It was only until recently that they started hooking up. Looking back, it all makes sense. He and Roger would hang out all the time and I was never invited. Roger even got my boyfriend hired as a makeup artist at his job. They were constantly together. But at the same time, I had never seen my boyfriend so happy. He said he could finally be himself. This is when I realized that it was for the best. I stopped begging him to get back with me and I started dating other people. They even invited me to their wedding, which was beautiful. Now we have dinner a few times a month and I've got a new boyfriend. Life is crazy.
This is why you can never trust anyone, not even the man that your mother marries. Thank you, Jake, for sending me your story, and I'm sorry for everything that you've been through. When Jake was 6 and a half, his father died, and his mother ended up getting remarried to this guy who was a drug dealer, and ended up becoming one of the biggest drug dealers in the surrounding cities. So he moved in with Jake and his mom, and he started off by selling weed from their house. And you know, Jake has lived in this house his whole life. He's only 6, and this random man comes in and starts changing up his whole life. Jake's father started doing way better in the drug community, and he started to think to himself, you know what? I could be doing so much better. So he hired a bunch of people to make crack cocaine, heroin, and PCP for him, and started selling those as well, and his power just kept building. He was making so much money that he was buying himself new cars, and he would end up crashing them within a month of having them. In the 4.5 years that Jake lived with him, he seriously went through about 30 or 40 cars. He would get Jake video games and really whatever he wanted just to buy his love, while he was also getting his mother high and selling drugs in the living room at the same time. There is so much more to this story. Part 2 is coming right now. Part 2 of Jake's drug dealer stepdad. You guys have no idea what he was for you. Jake's stepdad is now this huge drug dealer. He's selling heroin, crack, cocaine. He's trying to buy everybody's love, and he's getting Jake's mom high at the same time. Jake's stepdad wanted to make even stronger drugs, so he needed somebody to test it on, so he chose Jake himself. And Jake at the time was only 7 years old, so his stepfather was drugging him and almost killing him multiple times. No, seriously, there was this time that he went to the hospital and his heart stopped for 14 seconds. You would think that'd be a wake-up call, but no, he still went home and gave him more drugs. Then one day the cops come to Jake's house and they catch his stepdad in the barn with a shotgun. And normally this would be okay, but he was on probation. And if you're on probation, you can't have a gun. When the cops were looking around the barn, they found a hidden room. And in there was a safe full of drugs and cash. So he goes to jail to get prosecuted, and at this point, Jake is going to go live with his aunt and uncle that live in a different state. A few months later, Jake gets the news that his mother died, so he flies back home to help his grandparents cope. Sorry guys, part 3 is coming right now. Part 3 of Jake's drug dealer stepdad story. So Jake's stepdad finally goes to jail, he gets prosecuted, and then Jake goes to live with his aunt and uncle in a different state. And a few months later, he finds out that his mother has died, so he flies back home to help his grandparents cope. And I don't know what Jake was thinking at this time, but honestly, I probably would have assumed that she died from like a drug overdose or something. But it turns out that she had been shot in the head. So after long hours of this investigation and talking to cops, they find out that she was holding the gun in her left hand, and she shot herself in the right side of her head. Now that doesn't make any sense, because if you were left-handed, you would have shot yourself on the left side of your head. And the other thing was that she was not left-handed, she was right-handed. So this led to them opening a bigger investigation and trying to find a suspect, in which they found out that somebody had been holding her hand while she was holding the gun and forced her to shoot herself. So she had been murdered. So when the cops found this guy, they had to drag him out of a crack house and bring him down for questioning. Turns out Jake's stepdad hired this guy to kill Jake's mother, his wife, so that his secrets wouldn't get out. Part 4, last part, is coming right now. Part 4 of Jake's drug dealer murderer stepfather. So Jake's mom had died. They found out that she was actually forced to kill herself, so she was murdered. And then they find out that Jake's stepdad hired this guy to kill Jake's mother, who he was married to, all because he was afraid that she was going to spill his secrets. So Jake is going through all of this. Both of his parents are gone. He's finding out all this new information, and he's just a little kid. So his whole family's in mourning. Jake is really depressed. He's not moving out of his bed for 3 days at a time. He's not sleeping or eating. And finally, the court case comes around, and Jake gets to testify against his stepfather. And he was found guilty for planned murder, possession of weapons and drugs while on probation, and testing out his drugs on 7-year-old Jake, and a bunch of other things. And he got sentenced to 112 years without a chance of probation. While I'm so glad that guy gets to rot in jail for the rest of his life, that still does not bring Jake's mother back. This just goes to show, guys, be careful who you get involved with, and you never really know too much about somebody. Thank you again, Jake, for sending me your story.
This murderer hunted his victims down like wild animals in his own twisted game. In 1973, a woman in Anchorage, Alaska was walking alone on the side of the road when a man driving by offered to give her a ride. The man's quiet and passive attitude made the woman trust him, and so she accepted the ride. But a short while into the ride, his attitude suddenly changed as he pulled out a pistol and placed it at her head, telling her not to try anything. Now scared for her life, the woman complied as he took her to an airport where he forced her to get into his own personal plane at gunpoint. They now flew far into the woods where he had made an airstrip along with a cabin. Once they landed, he led her into the cabin where he armed himself with a rifle and a knife. He then explained the rules of his twisted game, telling her that she had 5 minutes to run or hide deep in the woods before he would hunt her down. Eager to escape, the woman bolted into the woods, weaving between the trees before quickly becoming lost in the unfamiliar surroundings. She stopped for a second to look around, and a knife suddenly flew into the tree next to her. This murderer hunted his victims down like wild animals in his own twisted game. Part 2. Sorry for the wait. Robert Hansen, who set several hunting records in Alaska, was a veteran working as a baker. Dealing with schizophrenia and other mental disorders, he began kidnapping women and bringing them to his cabin. Using his military training, he would then hunt them down, making sure none of them escaped. Police began finding the bodies of his victims in the woods, some too old to even identify. Eventually, they suspected him as he was one of the best hunters in the area, and every victim was expertly tracked. Upon searching his house, they found an arsenal of weapons as well as a map marked with X's. Police searched all of the 17 marked spots on the map and found a body at each of them. Robert initially denied all the murders, but eventually confessed, blaming the women for his actions. Robert kidnapped at least 30 women, but was only charged for the murder of 4 that were identified. He was sentenced to 461 years in prison. This man discovered he was married to twins when one of them got into a car accident. Charlie Bernard lived in Florida in 1984. While there, he met a girl named Amanda Hopkins who went to the same college. They got along really well, and after only 2 years, they ended up getting married and moving in together. But soon after, Charlie began noticing strange behavior like day-to-day mood swings and forgetfulness. Once, Amanda even asked him to fix a broken sink in the house, strangely forgetting that they had fixed it together the previous day. One night, while Charlie was home alone, he received a call from police and later Amanda's parents telling him that she was in a car accident and was now in the hospital in critical condition. Charlie was devastated and hardly able to think as he searched around for his car keys, preparing to leave for the hospital. But just as he was about to leave, he heard the front door open. He was shocked to see Amanda walking in through the front door and immediately knew something wasn't right. Part 2 coming today. This man discovered he was married to twins when one of them got into a car accident. Part 2. Sorry for the wait. He was speechless to see Amanda after he was told she was in critical condition, but she herself was confused at his reaction. Amanda asked what was wrong, and Charlie explained the phone calls he had just received. Hearing what has happened to Amanda, she burst into tears and confessed that she was Amanda's twin sister named Joy, posing as Amanda. As kids, her and Amanda were inseparable, doing everything together and sharing everything they had. When Amanda got married to Charlie, they didn't want to lead different lives, and so they decided they would take turns staying with Charlie while the others stayed with their nearby friends. Charlie, whose life had been flipped upside down, divorced Amanda, who was in a coma for 6 months before waking up with significant memory loss and unable to walk. Charlie later became a successful car dealer and never married again. Be sure to follow for more crazy stories. This woman hired 4 hitmen to get rid of her husband. 41-year-old Mary Ellen Samuels was married and living in Northridge, California. Her husband was a successful businessman with life insurance, meaning if he were to die, she would gain $500,000 as well as his high-end car and the Subway restaurant he owned. But one day, after a serious disagreement, she found out that her husband finally wanted a divorce, meaning she would no longer get the insurance money if he died, and so she decided she needed him dead before he can get the divorce. She thought the easiest way to get rid of him was to get a hitman, and so she hired a hitman named James Bernstein to murder her husband for $5,000. But James Bernstein was not the best hitman, and he ended up trying to murder her husband 3 times and failed every single time. After these failed attempts, James Bernstein decided to switch up his strategy, and so he hired another hitman named Mike Silva to do his job for him without telling Mary. You will not believe how crazy this story gets. Part 2 coming soon. This woman hired 4 hitmen to get rid of her husband. Part 2. Sorry for the wait. Now, the second hitman, named Mike, easily murdered the husband by simply walking into the house and firing at him. The police now began investigating the murder and quickly suspected Mary because she went on a large spending spree immediately after her husband was murdered. With the police now suspecting Mary, she wanted to cover her tracks, and so she hired 2 more hitmen to get rid of James, the first hitman she hired. The 2 hitmen got James into a car and began attempting to strangle him. But as they wrestled with James in the car, one of the hitmen accidentally hit the other hitman, and so James was able to get out of the car and run. But the 2 hitmen chased him down and eventually were able to strangle him. Mary almost got away with everything, but for an unknown reason, she decided to keep James's wallet. The police ended up finding the wallet in her possession, and she was convicted, given the death sentence, and is still on death row today. The other 2 hitmen only received 15 years for their crimes.